post-traumatic stress disorder. The discussion and condition of one's mental health has become more culturally acceptable in the recent years. In fact, the claims of a mental disorder seem to be more appealing to us humans than ever before. As we go about our daily lives, we find ourselves either using or hearing acronyms such as ADD, ADHD, OCD, ODD, and even PTSD. The claims of these disorders simply have to be out of proportion to the actual diagnosis. I feel that the use of "I have PTSD" has become extremely overused by the general public as their way of explaining their behavior. While post-traumatic stress disorder is a very real mental disorder, it might be one of the most misunderstood and overused. The National Institute of Mental Health says anyone can get PTSD at any age. This includes war veterans and survivors of physical and sexual assault, abuse, accidents, disasters, and many other serious events. While reading in my Essentials of Psychiatric Mental Health Nursing, Concepts of Care and Evidence-Based Practice, I also learned about some characteristic symptoms, which included re-experiencing the traumatic event, a sustained level of high anxiety, or a general numbing of responsiveness. The misuse of the term PTSD is understandable if one was to simply take these surface-level definitions. PTSD used to be called combat exhaustion or combat fatigue, because it was only the physical manifestations that were explored. Following the Gulf War, some veterans felt that their unexplained medical symptoms were on a continuum going back to the soldier's heart from World War I. The first person who really discovered the connection between the psychological and physiological problems was Abraham Codner, an American psychoanalyst who worked with World War I veterans. Researching past the definitions of PTSD, you have to also consider and remember that traumatic, life-threatening events, which we all have, come in different forms. Yes, many are more traumatic than others, and what might traumatize some will not traumatize others. Life-threatening events can range from being in a war zone to being physically abused day after day for many years. The natural instinct in face of danger is fight or flight. That is the way God created us. I've discovered through research that people with PTSD, this natural healthy reaction that is meant to protect a person from harm, is either changed or damaged. People who have PTSD may feel stressed or frightened even when they're no longer in danger. These people tend to relive the traumatic event over and over again. This is extremely heartaching to see in young people, even small children, due to circumstances beyond their control, be it abuse or natural disaster. When my brother joined the United States Marine Corps in the summer of 2012, I became interested in why it was that some people develop PTSD and others do not. Not just people in the military, but all people that live through any type of traumatic, life-threatening event. I remember reading that resilience is the most typical reason that some people tend not to experience PTSD. These resilient people tend to have strong family ties, a firm religious foundation, and a strong self-confidence. This in no way implies that those who suffer from PTSD do not have any of these resilient characteristics. When my family and I went to Paris Island, South Carolina to attend my brother's boot camp graduation, we had the privilege of seeing a day in the life of boot camp. What I saw made me wonder what I wasn't seeing. People automatically think of war veterans developing PTSD, but they do not think about young boys at military boot camp developing it. They should. The stories we heard and the sights we saw were just about enough to make me develop PTSD. Back to war veterans for a moment. As we approach the 4th of July, I cannot help but think about all of the men and women that suffer with PTSD due to gunfire and explosives. For it is on this day that the average Joe enjoys their oohs and ahs as they delight in the sights and sounds of fireworks. Yet a person suffering from PTSD due to war might be experiencing flashbacks and stuff. I know a person that was in the U.S. Army and he did not have to go into any battlefields, but he did have a traumatic event happen. While he and a buddy were unloading explosives, an accident occurred and his buddy was literally blown up right in front of him. The greater majority of people would agree that such an event, life-threatening, would definitely result in PTSD. It did. There is new hope on the horizon for those who suffer from PTSD. The National Institute of Mental Health researchers are exploring new and orphan medications thought to target underlying causes of PTSD in an effort to prevent the disorder. They are also attempting to enhance cognitive, personality, and social protective factors and to minimize risk factors to warn off full-blown PTSD after trauma. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a mental illness that needs to be better understood by the general population. This is not a disorder that anyone with symptoms such as irritability, self-destruction, and/or explosiveness should claim. There is so much more to this mental disorder as with any mental disorder. As I have said, PTSD can happen to anyone at any age, but most importantly, let's remember that the symptoms also include re-experiencing the traumatic event, a sustained high level of anxiety, or a general numbingness of responsiveness. This is a physical and psychological disorder. Let's all try to learn more about mental illnesses and how to help people cope and live with it, not develop it ourselves.